Iran Daily Briefing. Monday, April 6, 2026. A U.S. deadline for Iran expires tomorrow. In a Wall Street Journal interview, President Trump said that if Iran has not reopened the Strait of Hormuz by Tuesday evening, American forces will destroy Iranian power plants and bridges. Iran has rejected the ultimatum outright. This is the sharpest escalation in a conflict now 38 days old, and it comes as Washington and Tehran offer conflicting accounts of a rescue mission inside Iranian territory. We'll have the full picture later in today's briefing. Today is Monday, April 6, 2026. The US-Iran war has reached a critical juncture. The Strait of Hormuz remains blockaded. US and Israeli strikes on Iran have continued. And now a deadline, set by President Trump himself, expires tomorrow evening, April 7th. Al Jazeera reporting puts the conflict at 38 days old. In that time, the strikes have hit universities, power infrastructure, and military facilities. Iran has struck targets in Israel and in the Gulf. Today's episode covers the deadline and what follows it, a dispute over the fate of a downed American aircrew, Iran's escalating warnings over its Bushehr nuclear plant, and a regional voice calling for guaranteed access through the strait. Here's what we know. The central story today is President Trump's deadline and what it means for the next 24 hours. In a Wall Street Journal interview, Trump was unambiguous. His words, as reported by Al Monitor: "If they don't do something by Tuesday evening, they won't have any power plants and they won't have any bridges standing." Trump set Tuesday evening, that is April 7th, as the cutoff for Iran to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. If Tehran does not comply, Trump has threatened strikes on power plants and bridges across Iran. Iran's response was immediate and categorical. Iranian officials rejected the ultimatum and called Trump's threats an incitement to war crimes. Iran's Deputy Foreign Minister Kazem Garibabadi posted on X on April 6 that threatening civilian infrastructure, specifically power plants and bridges, constitutes a war crime under Article 8(2)b of the Rome Statute, the treaty underpinning the International Criminal Court. Tehran also said it would respond in kind to any attacks on its infrastructure. That is the official Iranian position. But what is actually happening on the diplomatic track? France 24 reporter Reza Sayad, reporting from Tehran, says there is no indication that legitimate talks are taking place between Iran and Washington. That assessment from inside the Iranian capital is significant. Trump issued his original 48-hour ultimatum on Saturday, giving Tehran until roughly Monday, today, to cut a deal. No deal has been announced. No talks have been confirmed. The deadline has now been extended to Tuesday evening. The threats themselves are drawing scrutiny beyond Tehran. Iran's top university was struck during US and Israeli attacks, killing 34 people, according to Al Jazeera. Separately, Al Jazeera reports that at least 13 people, including 6 children, were killed in Baharistan during strikes. These figures are sourced from Al Jazeera. US and Israeli officials have not publicly confirmed or addressed the casualty numbers. Tehran also warned that it will respond to attacks on its infrastructure in kind, a phrase that could mean strikes on US assets or partners in the region. As we've covered in prior episodes, Iran has already struck targets in the Gulf. That pattern is the backdrop against which Tuesday's deadline arrives. What to watch? Whether Iran makes any move on the strait before Tuesday evening, April 7th, and whether any back-channel communication produces a signal, even an informal one, that talks are underway. Absent that, the deadline framework Trump has set leads to a direct escalation. Story 1. The Gulf, Iran's drone strike and regional pressure. On the military front beyond Iran's borders, Iran's Khatam al-Anbiya Central Headquarters spokesperson Ibrahim Zolfagari stated this week that Iranian forces struck US assets on Kuwait's Bubiyan Island with drones, hitting satellite equipment and munitions. Zolfagari also stated that US forces had relocated to Bubiyan from Arifjan camp after that base was repeatedly struck by Iran. The US has not publicly confirmed the Bubiyan strike or the relocation. The claim comes from an Iranian military spokesperson, and that context matters. It is a single-source account from a party to the conflict. Into this environment, UAE official Anwar Gargash said on April 6 that any settlement of the US-Iran war must guarantee access through the Strait of Hormuz. The UAE's position reflects how directly Gulf states are affected by the blockade. Separately, Iran's blockade of the strait has already driven diesel prices to more than double in Vietnam, according to Al Jazeera, an illustration of how the economic consequences are spreading well beyond the immediate theater of conflict. What to watch? Whether other Gulf states add their voices to the UAE's call for guaranteed strait access, and whether that regional pressure creates any diplomatic opening before Tuesday. Story 2. The Bushehr nuclear plant. Iran's atomic energy chief Mohammad Eslami wrote to the IAEA Director General Rafael Grossi on April 6, stating that the UN nuclear watchdog's inaction emboldens aggression against nuclear facilities, including the Bushehr power plant. Eslami stated that Bushehr, Iran's only functioning nuclear power plant, has been targeted 4 times, with the most recent attack near the facility occurring on April 4th. That April 4th strike killed a security staff member and injured others, according to Al Monitor. The IAEA Director General Rafael Grossi expressed deep concern on April 4th over reports of a projectile strike near Bushehr, according to globalsecurity.org. The sequence here is notable: a strike near a functioning nuclear plant, the IAEA head expressing concern, and now Iran's nuclear chief formally demanding the IAEA act. Tehran is using the Bushehr attacks to frame Washington's campaign as a threat to nuclear safety, a framing designed to internationalize pressure on the United States. What to watch? The IAEA's formal response to Eslami's letter, and whether Grossi calls for any specific protective measures or convenes an emergency board session. Story 3. OPEC+ oil markets. Separate from the conflict itself, OPEC Plus agreed to raise oil production quotas by 206,000 barrels per day from May, the second consecutive monthly increase. However, 4 sources familiar with the discussions told Reuters and Business Line that the increase may exist largely on paper, because key member states are unable to actually raise their output to meet the new quotas. What this means for the Strait of Hormuz situation: if the strait remains closed and OPEC+ members cannot compensate with real production increases, the market pressure on oil-importing nations continues to build. The UAE's call for guaranteed strait access, covered above, sits directly alongside this economic reality. What to watch? Whether OPEC+ production data in May reflects actual output gains or confirms that the quota increase was largely nominal. Story 4. Domestic repression inside Iran. Inside Iran, the government executed Ali Fahim on Monday. Fahim was convicted of attempting to storm a military facility and access an armory during unrest in January. The Supreme Court upheld his sentence before the execution was carried out. Middle East Eye and the Times of Israel both report this execution. Middle East Eye also notes that 3 others tied to the same January incident were previously executed: Amir Hossein Hatami, Mohammad Amin Biglari, and Shaheen Vahed Parast. That brings the total number of executions connected to the January unrest to at least 4. What to watch? Whether rights organizations or UN bodies issue formal statements in response to this 4th execution, and whether the pace of proceedings against others detained during the January unrest accelerates. The cold open referenced conflicting accounts of a US rescue mission inside Iran. Here is the full picture. Early on April 5th, US forces rescued the second crew member of a downed F-15E fighter jet inside Iran, according to globalsecurity.org. President Trump announced Sunday that a downed U.S. crew member had been recovered safe and sound. France 24 reports that American commandos deployed into Iranian territory to carry out the rescue. Trump, approximately 1 hour after social media reports of explosions near the city of Yasuj in central Iran, confirmed the second airman's recovery. Tehran's account differs. Iran claimed the U.S. rescue mission was foiled. The United States says it successfully recovered the service member. Those two accounts cannot both be accurate. The U.S. is reporting a successful extraction. Iran is reporting it was stopped. No independent reporting from inside Iran has resolved the conflict. Both claims come directly from governments with clear interests in how the story is told. The single most consequential item in the next 24 hours is Tuesday evening, April 7th, the deadline President Trump set for Iran to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. Trump told the Wall Street Journal that after that point, Iran will have no functioning power plants and no standing bridges. Iran has rejected the ultimatum. France 24's Reza Sayad in Tehran reports no legitimate talks are underway. Watch for any signal from Tehran before the deadline, a formal communication, a back-channel indication, or a military gesture on the strait that could give either side a basis to pause. Watch also for the IAEA's response to Mohammed Eslami's letter of April 6th. With Bushehr struck 4 times and the IAEA director already on record expressing concern, a formal agency response is likely within this news cycle. On the military side, Iran's claim that it struck U.S. assets on Bubiyan Island in Kuwait deserves follow-up. If the U.S. confirms the strike or the relocation of forces, it will be the clearest picture yet of how far Iran's campaign has extended into Gulf territory. And watch OPEC+, specifically whether member states signal they can meet the new May production quotas, or whether the 206,000 barrel per day increase remains a paper commitment while the strait stays closed. Today's briefing covered President Trump's April 7th deadline for Iran to reopen the Strait of Hormuz, Iran's categorical rejection of that ultimatum and its war crimes counterclaim, the successful U.S. rescue of a downed F-15E aircrew member disputed by Tehran, Iran's formal complaint to the IAEA over strikes near Bushehr, an Iranian drone strike on U.S. assets in Kuwait, OPEC+ output decision, and the execution of Ali Fahim in connection with January's domestic unrest. We'll be back tomorrow as the deadline arrives. If you found today's briefing valuable, subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. New episodes every morning.